the need to be prolific for the sake of number, for the sake of quantity. So
Washington Journal airs live every morning at 7 Eastern. The U.S. House is today.
Does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3541, the Prenatal Non-Discrimination Act of 2012, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3541, a bill to prohibit discrimination against the unborn on the basis of sex or race and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Franks, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 3541 as amended, currently under consideration.
Without any objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield myself as such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Prenatal Non-Discrimination Act we are debating at this moment simply says that an unborn child cannot be discriminated against by subjecting them to an abortion based on the sex of the child. Because between 40 and 50% of African-American babies, nearly 1 in 2, are killed by abortion, that's 5 times, Mr. Chairman, the rate of white children, I believe with all of my heart that this bill should also prohibit race-targeted abortion, as it did when the bill was first introduced. It is my hope that by protecting unborn children from being aborted based on their sex, that one day, very soon, we will also recognize the humanity and justice of protecting unborn children regardless of their race or color as well, and simply because we recognize them as fellow human beings. With that said, Mr. Speaker, worldwide sex selection abortion has now left the human family on Earth with approximately 200 million missing baby girls. Various United Nations organizations have battled sex selection abortion for years. These agencies routinely refer to sex selection abortion as, quote, an extreme form of violence against women, close quote. In the New Atlantis magazine, political economist Nicholas Eberstadt of the American Enterprise Institute said, in terms of its sheer toll in numbers, human numbers, sex-selective abortion has assumed a scale tantamount to a global war against baby girls, close quote. In 2007, the United States spearheaded a UN resolution to condemn sex selection abortion worldwide. Yet here in the land of the free and the home of the brave, we are the only advanced country left in the world that still doesn't restrict sex selection abortion in any way. Mr. Speaker, a number of academic papers have now published evidence that the practice of sex selection abortion is demonstrably increasing here in the United States, especially, but not exclusively, in the Asian immigrant community. A study by researchers at the University of Connecticut, published in Prenatal Diagnosis of March 2011, found that male-to-female live birth sex ratio in the United States for Chinese, Asian Indians, and Koreans clearly exceeded biological variation for third births and beyond. Mr. Speaker, deliberate prenatal sex selection is the only plausible explanation. Dr. Sunita Puri and 3 other researchers at the University of California interviewed 65 immigrant Indian women in the United States who had sought or were seeking sex selection abortion. They found that 40% of the women interviewed had deliberately aborted unborn baby girls previously, and nearly 90% of the women who were currently carrying an unborn baby girl were also currently seeking to abort them. This was an incredibly powerful study, Mr. Speaker, and it discussed in detail the multiple forms of pressure and outright coercion to which these women are often subjected. 62% of the women described verbal abuse from their husbands or female in-laws, and fully 1/3 of women described past physical abuse and neglect, all related specifically to their failing to produce a male child. As a result, these women reported aborting multiple unborn baby girls in a row because of the pressure that was put on them to have a male child. Mr. Speaker, sex selection abortion is extreme violence against both unborn baby girls and their mothers. It's been a primary enforcement mechanism for China's forced abortion and one-child policy for many years. It has dramatically increased sex trafficking and violence against women due to the imbalanced sex ratios left in its wake across the world. And we now know that it is a tragic circumstance into which many women are also being coerced. This evil practice has now allowed thousands of little girls in America and millions of little girls across the world to be brutally dismembered, most of them in their second or third trimester, when they are capable of feeling extreme pain simply because they were little girls instead of little boys, Mr. Speaker. Sex selection is violence against women, and it is the truest kind of war against women. And it has now brought humanity to a place where the three deadliest words on this earth are, "It's a girl." What in God's name have we come to, Mr. Speaker? You know, I've often asked myself what finally enlightened and changed the hearts of those across history who have either perpetrated or supported or ignored the atrocities and human genocides of their day. And while I probably will never fully understand, I believe I caught a glimpse of the answer from my 3-year-old little girl, Gracie. As I was holding her and we were watching her favorite laughing baby videos on YouTube, I inadvertently clicked on a video that showed a young man from China playing poignant and beautiful music on the piano with his feet because both of his arms had been amputated when he was a child. Trying to seize on a teaching moment, Mr. Speaker, I said, "Look at that, Gracie. He's playing the piano with his feet. Isn't that amazing?" But with a stricken little look on her face, Gracie said, "But Daddy, he doesn't have any arms." And I said, "I know, baby, and that's very sad, isn't it?" And she said, "Oh, Daddy, it is very sad. We got to help him. We just got to. We've got to get some arms and give it to him." And I said, "But baby, there aren't any extra arms. They're all hooked on to other people." And she thought for a moment and looked at me with wet little eyes and pulled up her sleeve and held up her little arm and said, "But Daddy, can I give him one of my arms if it will fit on him?" You know, across human history, the greatest and most loving voices among us have always emphasized the critical responsibility each of us has to recognize and cherish the light of divine, eternal humanity shining in the soul of every last one of our fellow human beings. And I believe the answer to some of these seemingly unanswerable questions, Mr. Speaker, that face the human families and how we see each other. On that YouTube video, I saw an amazing young man who played heart-stirring music with his feet. But my little girl saw a child of God who had no arms and wanted to give him one of hers. And how very thankful I am that my little Gracie was not one of the hundreds of millions of little girls whose lives and hearts were torn from this world before they ever saw the light of sunrise, simply because they were little girls instead of little boys. And I know that this Congress deals with many controversial issues where it's sometimes difficult for Republicans and Democrats to find common ground. But I refuse to believe that we cannot find enough humanity in this body to conclude together that it is wrong to knowingly kill unborn children because they are baby girls instead of baby boys. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman
Mr.
from
Speaker,
Michigan.
I would yield myself such time as I may consume.
So recognized.
Members of the House, I want to thank the leadership on the other side for requiring that the chairman of the Constitution Subcommittee, the gentleman from Arizona, drop race from this prenatal non-discrimination act, so-called, and so it's now just sex selection. It's the latest in a long series of measures intended to chip away at a woman's right to seek safe, legal medical care. It tramples the rights of women under the guise of non-discrimination, while doing absolutely nothing to provide women with the needed resources so that their babies, female and male, can come into the world healthy and so that both mother and child can thrive. And I am grateful that the proponents of this bill have stopped making the ridiculous charge that I used to hear that reproductive freedom is worse than slavery, and invoking at the same time the name of the great abolitionist leader, Frederick Douglass, in the service of their cause. It was deeply offensive, and I'm glad that we won't have to listen to that anymore. And I will at this point reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Speaker, I would now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida, Mrs. Adams.
The gentleman from Florida.
She's a member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Speaker.
Is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 3451, the Prenatal Non-Discrimination Act, PRENDA, introduced by Representative Trent Franks. As a mother of a daughter, I am disturbed by what I am hearing about sex selection occurring in the United States. A 2008 Columbia University report found that there is strong son bias and that there is clear evidence of sex selection, most likely at the prenatal stage. The victims of sex selection abortions are predominantly female, and most are later term, which means these gruesome abortions are occurring after the child becomes pain capable. In 2007, the United States spearheaded an international resolution to condemn sex selection. Yet, however, there are no laws preventing or prohibiting the practice in the United States. And while I stand here, I think about just yesterday, as I watched as my little granddaughter inside her mother's womb turned towards that ultrasound. This issue of life is a divisive one in politics, but I think all Americans can agree aborting babies because they are the wrong sex is just plain wrong. Let's put a stop to this egregious practice, and let's pass this legislation.
Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased now to recognize the ranking member of the Constitution Subcommittee, the distinguished gentleman from New York, Jerry Nadler, for as much time as he may consume.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to the so-called Prenatal Non-Discrimination Act. Today, the Republican majority continues its war on women in a new and creative way by attempting to couch legislation that would destroy women's fundamental constitutional rights as a women's rights law. It is cynical but creative. Trying to destroy women's constitutional rights and pretending that it is somehow being pro-woman plays well to the far right-wing base but does nothing to help American families get on their feet and put people back to work. This bill criminalizes abortion prior to viability. It makes pre-viability abortions a crime under certain circumstances, a flagrantly unconstitutional provision under Roe v. Wade. Under this bill, a relative who disagreed with a woman's choice would be able to sue a doctor simply by alleging that the woman had an impermissible motive. The doctor would face years of litigation at great expense. A relative could even obtain an injunction blocking an abortion from going forward merely by alleging that the abortion is being done for the purposes of sex selection. While the matter is being litigated, the pregnancy would go forward so that regardless of the merits, a woman would be compelled by a court injunction to proceed with her pregnancy against her will, perhaps to have an abortion at a much later stage with a much more mature fetus. Any clinic employee who suspected, merely suspected, that a woman's motives ran afoul of this law would have a legal obligation under penalty of prison to report that suspicion to law enforcement. How would this affect the basic practice of medicine? H.R. 3541 would force health care providers to inquire into a woman's reasons for seeking abortion services. Physicians would have to consider whether women seeking routine non-abortion services, such as determining the sex of the fetus, might then use that information in deciding whether to continue a pregnancy. Given the severe civil and criminal penalties in this bill, doctors would be forced to police their patients, read their minds, and conceal information from them. The failure to do so would put medical professionals at risk of prosecution and lawsuits. This bill is facially unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has held, beginning with Roe v. Wade and in Casey and subsequent cases, that the decision whether to have a child or whether to end the pregnancy is a private one. Up until the point of viability, the government may not make that decision for a woman. Following viability, the government may regulate or bar an abortion, except when the abortion is necessary to protect the life or health of the woman. The preference for male children is a real, if limited, phenomenon in the United States. Some women face familial and community preference to have male children, and that pressure can increase with each subsequent birth. But this bill does nothing to help those women. This bill cites the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women as urging governments to prevent sex-selective abortions, but it ignores the concerns of those who work on this problem, such as the UN Population Fund, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the UN Children's Fund, UN Women, and the World Health Organization, that abortion restrictions are not the solution because they put women's health and lives in jeopardy and violate women's human and reproductive rights. Where is the legislation providing women with the means to achieve independence so they are not subject to community and family pressures? My Republican colleagues opposed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act that would have done just that. We all had to watch the charade recently where Republicans pretended they weren't going after the Violence Against Women Act with a meat axe. Where is the support for family planning services so we have fewer unplanned pregnancies and therefore fewer abortions? Where is the commitment to maternal and child health programs? But all this costs money. It won't do anything to undermine Roe v. Wade, and it doesn't play well in the world of abortion politics. I urge the members of this House to reject the cynical, dishonest, and hypocritical legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Speaker, I would now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King. He is the Vice Chairman of the Judiciary Immigration Subcommittee.
Gentleman from Iowa is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman from Arizona for his leadership on this issue and many other issues. And I come to the floor here in strong support of this act that's before us, this Prenda Act. And, you know, the very idea of sex selection, abortion, gendercide, as it was so aptly named, brought back to mind for me a story that I heard from a man whom I admired. His name was Gil Copper. Sadly, we lost him back in 2010. Gil Copper was a World War II veteran who volunteered with Merrill's Marauders in Asia and marched across those areas in India and Burma to take on the Japanese behind the scenes. Gil Copper picked up and was awarded 1 Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, 1 Combat Infantry Badge, and 1 Purple Heart. And Gil Copper spent his time off in Asia under the bridge in New Delhi, India, standing in the Ganges River, listening for the splash. Standing there day or night, any time he had off, listening for the splash of a little baby girl that would often and regularly be tossed off of the bridge into the river to drown because the culture in India cherished boys and doesn't cherish girls. And Gil Copper would swim out there and pick up those little girls that were floating then in the filthy Ganges River and swim back with them and dry them off and carry them to the Catholic orphanage in New Delhi. And he saved scores of lives during that period of time. That culture has arrived here in this country, and this bill puts an end to that kind of culture that would select baby girls for death. I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased now to yield to Hank Johnson, a distinguished member of the House Judiciary Committee, 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is not about civil rights, but it's simply another attempt to chip away at a woman's right to choose. It's part of the Republican war on women, also known as WOW. I'm like, wow, why are we continuing to attack women like this? Wow. It's men against women. See, what's happening is we're in a political year, ladies and gentlemen, and politics has been good to the Republicans as of late. They have pitted people who favor immigration against those who support it. They have divided people on affirmative action for African Americans. They have divided people on the issues of gays living in America. These are all diversionary issues. They've been attacking labor, saying that it's because of labor that you don't have what you should have. It's a political season, and so this is what they're doing with this bill. It's pitting the men against the women. This bill seeks to prohibit discrimination against the unborn on the basis of gender, but it's really a part of the divide and conquer approach that has been hugely successful for these Republicans. It would require doctors to become mind readers, ladies and gentlemen, and require them to determine what the sex of the child is and whether or not that is a factor in a woman's determination to have an abortion. It's ridiculous. It's shameful. Many of the supporters of this bill are the same ones who voted to eliminate funding for Planned Parenthood and the Teen Pregnancy Prevention Initiative. That's funding that would have helped prevent unintended pregnancies. They also voted, ladies and gentlemen, to repeal, and repeatedly, they voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which has improved the health of uninsured women and children. And recently they supported Rush Limbaugh in his attack on women and access to contraception. You see, this is part of the war on women. Wow. The record is shameful and it's clear. Instead of divisive attacks on a woman's right to choose, we should unite behind policies that prevent unintended pregnancies in the first place. I urge a no vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Chairman, I would now yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Burkle. She is a member of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee.
Gentlelady from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Arizona for his excellent work on this important bill. I rise this afternoon in support of H.R. 3541 as a woman, as a mother of 4 daughters, and as a grandmother of 3 granddaughters. Mr. Speaker, there can be no rights for women if we don't allow them the right to life. And what we're hearing from the other side this morning is about money and about political campaigns and about the rhetoric of the war on women. This is the ultimate war on women, Mr. Speaker. If we don't allow women to be born, we cannot talk about any other rights. So I stand here today. I urge all of my female colleagues in this House of Representatives to stand together and support H.R. 3541. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Yields back. Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased now to recognize the distinguished physician from Washington State, the Honorable Dr. McDermott. 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Washington is recognized for 2 minutes. Without objection, revision and extension is so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, as I listen to this debate, I'm not sure if we're talking about India or China, or where are we talking about here? The Republicans have set up another straw man. This bill is another Republican attack on women's rights. At the same time, it's masquerading as an anti-discrimination bill. It's about as cynical and deceptive as anything I've seen on the floor. I asked the proponents of this bill, if you care, Mr. Speaker, if they care about discrimination against women, why did they vote in the last Congress against women's rights to challenge gender-based pay discrimination? Why did you also vote to allow health insurers to continue charging women higher premiums based on their sex? These votes are on the record. That's what you think of women. My friends, this bill is not what it claims to be. It is not about fighting discrimination against women. It is the opposite. It is another Republican intrusion into a woman's right to choose. Women should be able to make such sensitive and private decisions with their families, their doctors, and their God, free from the fear of the police. What are you going to do, set up a registry? Every time they do a sonogram and they decide what the baby is, girl or boy, they're going to post it, and then they're going to follow. And if that woman then decides to have an abortion, well, she's getting rid of a girl. So we're going to criminally charge her with making that decision on the basis of the sex of the child. That's what kind of nonsense you're setting up. For people who don't want government in people's lives, who argue over and over and over about keeping the government. In fact, we don't want Obamacare. We don't want government in our lives at all. But in this one, you want them to go right into the personal mind of the woman and decide and criminally charge her. Do you think that's going to do any good? You simply are attacking women's rights.
His time has expired.
Of course, the gentleman knows there's no criminal thing in this bill for the women. That's an unfortunate fallacy. I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. Fleming. He's a member of the Armed Services Committee.
The Speaker will remind members to speak in third person, not in second person, while they're addressing the floor. The gentleman from Florida is recognized. From Louisiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentleman for authoring this fine bill, Mr. Franks from Arizona. You know, I find that gender-oriented abortion is problematic for two reasons. Number one is very obvious. The taking of an innocent life merely because that child happens to be a boy or a girl certainly goes against all the values that we hold true in America. But secondly, because of the technology requiring that you're well into the second trimester, even to determine the gender of the fetus, means that we're talking about a mid to late term abortion, something that is so brutal. Mr. Speaker, as a family physician and a father of 4, 2 boys and 2 girls, I've delivered over 300 babies in my career. Each and every child, regardless of his or her gender, is a unique individual, deserving of equal protection under the law. The American people agree with me on this. In fact, polls show that over 2/3 of Americans are supportive of eliminating abortion practices tailored to destroy babies because of their gender. Gendericide, which is really what this is, the deliberate annihilation of a particular sex, often unborn female children, as we know, generally occurs midway through pregnancy. These late-term abortions are grisly procedures where the condemned is often poisoned or dismembered before being extracted from the womb, sometimes in pieces. Medical evidence shows that a minimum unborn babies can experience pain at 20 weeks. So I do ask that my colleagues support this bill, H.R. 3541. Thank you, and I yield back.
Time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased now to turn to the former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus from Oakland, California, Barbara Lee, and recognize her for 3 minutes, please.
3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Gentlelady is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me thank Congressman Conyers for yielding the time, but also for your very bold and relentless leadership as our ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee. I rise today as a member of the Congressional Pro-Choice Caucus and also as the Health Care Task Force Chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. I rise in strong opposition to this bill. Supporters of this bill claim that the legislation would combat sex selection abortion and prevent the United States from becoming a safe haven for women seeking an abortion based on the sex of the pregnancy. Here we go again. This war on women continues, and this, quite frankly, is a shocking battle in this war. It really is shock and awe. Don't get me wrong. Of course we all are opposed to sex selection based on gender. That's not what this is about. This is about women's health care and gender discrimination. Also, and let me just read a paragraph from a letter signed by the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and other groups. If passed into law, this bill would require that medical and mental health professionals violate doctor-patient confidentiality and report known or suspected violations of the law to law enforcement authorities. The penalty for failure to report is a fine or incarceration for up to 1 year. Shock and awe. Let me tell you, this is a continuation of the war on women. There are those who have been actively working to reverse much of the progress women have been made by declaring this war on women that includes, mind you, stripping reproductive rights for women, cutting critical Title X funding, and for the WIC nutrition programs, for low-income infant and pregnant women. And yes, this war on women continues with slashed funding for food stamps and daycare spending. Let's call it what it is, Mr. Speaker. Supporters of this bill, they really are exploiting serious issues like racism and sexism in a backdoor attempt to make abortion illegal. It would also lead to further stigmatization of women, especially Asian Pacific American women who seek their constitutional rights to an abortion. And the ramifications are real and they are very dangerous. Attempts to restrict or deny access to safe abortions is harmful to women's health and would ultimately take us back to the days of back alley abortions. And if this bill passes, it would forever change the doctor-patient relationship as we know it by casting suspicion on doctors that serve communities facing... Mr. Chairman, may I have an additional 30 seconds?
The gentlelady's time has expired.
May I have an additional 30 seconds?
I yield the lady an additional minute.
Thank you very much.
Gentlelady from California is recognized for an additional minute.
Thank you very much. As I was saying, if this bill passes, it would forever change the doctor-patient relationship as we know it by casting suspicion on doctors that serve communities facing the greatest health disparities, many of which are minority communities. Now, as a woman of faith, I have always believed that decisions about whether to choose adoption, into pregnancy, or raise a child must be left to a woman, her family, and her faith, with the counsel of her doctor or health professional. Politics, government has no place preventing doctors and other health professionals from informing patients about all their health care options, and doctors should not be criminalized for providing constitutionally protected care. If supporters are really serious about advancing the real interests of women, I urge them to vote no on this bill. We need to work together to ensure that all women have meaningful access to health care that they need to stay healthy and to improve their own lives and their children's lives. We need to make sure that women get equal pay for equal jobs.
Time has expired.
15
seconds.
Gentlelady is recognized for an additional 15 seconds.
Thank you very much. I just want to conclude by saying if you really care about women and their children and their families, we need to work to end wage discrimination in this country. We need to work to end domestic violence that's tearing apart families across this country and reauthorize a real Violence Against Women's Act. So we need to reject this insidious attack on Roe versus Wade.
Gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Chairman, I now yield 2.5 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns. He's a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent my entire speech be part of the record.
So, without objections.
Let me say to the gentlelady and to Mr. Johnson, Mr. Nadler, this is a war on ethics. You talk about a war on women. This is a war on ethics. Woe to you if you vote against this bill. Now, Mr. Nadler was down here talking about this bill and how he's going to vote against it. But let me ask you, is there anybody in this chamber that wants to vote against sex selection abortion? Is that what you want to do? The coercion of sex selection abortion? That's what you want to do? The solicitation or acceptance of funds for sex selection abortion? You want to vote against that? And lastly, the transportation of a woman into the country to obtain a sex selection abortion? You want to vote against that? Woe to you. War on ethics. This is wrong for you to do that. In a recent letter, Planned Parenthood has once again chosen to put profits before women's well-being and is encouraging members of Congress to oppose this legislation, reinforcing sex discrimination and positioning the United States of America as a safe haven for those who cannot legally acquire sex selection abortion in their own home countries. But this is not surprising considering Planned Parenthood's record. As chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee on Oversight and Investigation, I have led an investigation, my colleagues, into Planned Parenthood's use of the more than $1 million of federal funds. These are dollars they receive every day, and their compliance with sexual assault and child abuse reporting laws. This was the first ever investigation in Planned Parenthood's history. Planned Parenthood has an extensive and well-documented record of improper Medicaid billing practices. All of you know that. You can go to the state of California and New York and read about those indictments. Violating state sexual assault and child abuse reporting laws and of encouraging young girls to lie to simply lie about their ages to circumvent state reporting laws. These four things in this bill, woe to you, war on ethics, if you vote against this. And I am just amazed that people of some kind of strong religious belief would come on this floor and say that you're going to believe that sex selection and abortion is okay. I can't even comprehend what you're doing. So let me just close by saying I encourage all of my colleagues, both Democrats and Republicans, to support this life-saving legislation and ban sex selection abortions, and to send the clear message that each and every girl is valued in our society.
The Speaker will again remind all members that you address the Speaker, not one another, and to avoid second person in any of your rhetoric. Gentleman from Michigan.
I thank the Speaker for reminding us all of the restrictions in terms of the debate. I thank you, and I reserve at this point.
Gentleman from Michigan reserves. Gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Speaker, can I inquire as to the remainder of the time?
Gentleman from Arizona has 5 minutes remaining. Gentleman from Michigan has 5 1/4 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn. She's a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee.
Gentlelady from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do rise in support of the Prenatal Non-Discrimination Act, and I thank the gentleman from Arizona for his leadership on the issue. Simply put, if what this bill does is to give baby girls the same chance at life as baby boys, Mr. Speaker, I think it's hypocrisy to say that one is pro-woman and that it's okay to end the life of an unborn child just because of its gender. Since when did America subscribe to the idea that males are worth more than females? We know that sex selection abortions happen all over the world, as was evidenced and certainly brought to light by human rights activists like Mr. Chin, who fled to America this month. But according to at least 6 academic studies published in the past 4 years, this tragic reality is playing out in our own backyard. And just this week, an undercover video showed a Planned Parenthood employee encouraging a woman to obtain a late-term abortion because she was purportedly carrying a girl and she wanted to have a boy instead. A vote against ending sex selection abortion is a vote in favor of gender bias and female gendercide. A vote against is a vote for organized and systematic subtraction of women in America through targeted abortions. It's sick, it's discriminatory, it's sexist, and it is blatantly anti-woman and anti-human. It's no surprise that a poll conducted this month by the Charlotte Lozier Institute showed 80% of women in this country support a law banning abortion in cases where the sole reason for seeking an abortion is that the developing baby is female. I support the legislation, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back.
Ladies, yield back. Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I desire and may consume.
Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I'd just like to remind my colleagues that from the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, we have this warning. We oppose this bill because it does not in any way address discrimination on the basis of sex or race. Rather, it is a veiled attempt to restrict health care for women of color under the guise of civil rights. This is the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. This bill tramples the rights of women under the guise of non-discrimination, while doing absolutely nothing to provide women with needed resources for their babies, female and male, so that they can come into this world healthy, and so both the mother and the child can thrive. This measure before us does absolutely nothing to empower women to make important life choices free from any family or community pressures they now face, either to have an abortion or to carry the pregnancy to term. In fact, it fails to employ the tested solutions that will reduce the pressures brought to bear on women to have sons. Experience around the world has shown that supporting women, providing them with tools to become independent and to be safe from violence, rather than from criminal prohibitions, helps them resist the pressures of son preference. International organizations, the United Nations Population Fund, for example, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, the United Nations Children's Fund, the United Nations Women, and the World Health Organization have all said that abortion restrictions are not the solution because they put women's health and lives at risk and violate their human and reproductive rights. Please join us and these organizations who are familiar with the phenomenon of son preference and oppose H.R. 3541. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Speaker, I would now yield 2.5 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith is a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, where he is the chairman of Africa Global Health and Human Rights Subcommittee.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I thank my good friend for yielding. Mr. Speaker, last year an undercover videotaped sting operation by Live Action exposed several Planned Parenthood affiliates who were eager, ready, and willing to facilitate secret abortions for underage sex trafficking victims, some as young or younger than 14. As the prime sponsor of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, I found the on-the-record willingness of Planned Parenthood personnel to exploit young girls and partner with sex traffickers to be absolutely appalling. Now Live Action has released another video sting operation part of a new series called Gendercide Sex Selection in America, showing Planned Parenthood advising an undercover female investigator how to procure a sex selection abortion. Caught on tape, Planned Parenthood tells the investigator to wait until the baby is 5 months along to get an ultrasound that will reveal the sex of the child. Then if it's a girl, kill it. Yesterday, the Huffington Post reported that, quote, no Planned Parenthood clinic will deny a woman an abortion based on her reasons for wanting one, except in states that explicitly prohibit sex selection abortions. In other words, Planned Parenthood is okay with exterminating a child in its huge network of clinics simply because she's a girl. What a dangerous place for little girls. Let's not forget that Planned Parenthood aborts approximately 330,000 children every year. This, Mr. Speaker, is the real war on women. For most of us, Mr. Speaker, It's a Girl is cause for enormous joy, happiness, and celebration. But in many countries, including our own, it could be a death sentence. Today, the three most dangerous words in China and India are, it's a girl. We can't let that happen here. In her book, Unnatural Selection, Marva Hivenstall traces the sordid history of sex selection abortion as a means of population control. She writes, by August of 1969, sex selection had become a pet scheme. Fewer girls, fewer future mothers, fewer future children. At the conference, Christopher Tizzi co-presented sex selection abortion as one of the 12 new strategies representing the future of population control. He, by the way, got the Margaret Sanger Award 4 years later. Sex selection abortion is cruel, it's discriminatory, and it's illegal. It's legal. It is violence against women. Most people in and out of government are unaware that it is part of a deliberate plan of population control.
Gentleman's time has
Support
expired.
the Franks Amendment.
Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 3/4 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, if this measure is passed into law, we would then require that medical and mental health professionals violate the doctor-patient confidentiality and report, quote, known or suspected violations, in quotation, of the law to law enforcement authorities. The penalty would be fine or incarceration. Now, it is not by accident, members of the House, that this measure is opposed by these outstanding organizations: the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the American Public Health Association, the Association of Reproductive Health Professionals, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, Medical Students for Choice, National Abortion Federation, the National Association of Nurse Practitioners and Women's Health, the National Family Planning and Reproductive Health Association, Physicians for Reproductive Health and Choice, Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Now, this is something that would chill communications between doctors and patients, and doctors because they might hear something that would put them at risk for criminal prosecution, and patients because they would fear that their conversations with their doctors would not remain private. And so what we are doing here is taking the most drastic step that would cause these 9 organizations to oppose this legislation. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't have time to correct all of the misinformation that my friends on the other side of the aisle have said here today. They've talked about everything about what this bill does. If I thought that America really supported aborting little girls because they were little girls as a people, then I guess I would conclude that the light of human compassion had gone out in our society and it was time to board this place up and go home and be done with it. But fortunately, Mr. Chairman, I know that 86% of the American people favor protecting little girls from sex selection abortion. And that gives me great hope, Mr. Chairman. I wish I had the time to mention all of the groups that are in favor of it. But I know that this is going to be the first step, and we're going to be on the right side of history and the right side of justice, and I urge a yes vote on this bill.
All time has expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3541 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is agreed to.
Mr. Chairman.
And without
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Gentleman from Arizona.
I request the yeas and nays, please.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. Sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed. We're moving to pass. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5512, the Divisional Realignment Act of 2012, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5512, a bill to amend Title 28 United States Code to realign divisions within 2 judicial districts.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Coble, and the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 5512 as amended, currently under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
I support H.R. 5512, the Divisional Realignment Act of 2012, sponsored by Representative Benny Thompson. On March 13, 2012, the Judicial Conference of the United States adopted a draft bill that realigns divisions within the Eastern District of Missouri and the Northern District of Mississippi. The Divisional Realignment Act of 2012 reflects the draft developed by the Judicial Conference, which the Judiciary Committee marked up on May 16th. The realignments equalize workloads among divisions, maximize the use of court facilities, and shorten commutes for jurors and attorneys. The bill is supported by the judges and attorneys from the 2 judicial districts and affected members from Missouri and Mississippi. The Congressional Budget Office states that H.R. 5512 will have only minimal administrative costs and thus no significant impact on the federal budget. The only change to the bill subsequent to our markup is the effective date. The local judges and the Judicial Conference asked Representative Benny Thompson, the bill's sponsor, and the other members of the committee to include a 60-day delayed effective date. This provides the local judges in Mississippi and Missouri with more time to adjust their jury wheels to account for the new realignments. This is a good common sense change that helps with the administration of justice in the Northern District of Mississippi and the Eastern District of Missouri. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that the Divisional Realignment Act of 2012 will be adopted by my colleagues, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 5512, the Divisional Realignment Act of 2012 as amended. This non-controversial measure, which the Judiciary Committee reported by voice vote, simply reorganizes divisions within the 2 federal judicial districts, namely the Eastern District of Missouri and the Northern District of Mississippi. I hope I pronounced Missouri correctly. Some say Missouri, some say Missouri. I'll stick with Missouri right now. I'm feeling kind of down home. This divisional realignment is being done at the request of 2 districts to improve judicial administration and access to court for jurors and litigants. These proposals were formally adopted by the Judicial Conference of the United States on March 13, 2012, and transmitted to the House Judiciary Committee. According to the Judicial Conference, these changes are supported by the judicial councils of the circuits in which these districts are located, as well as the United States attorneys for the affected districts. Under H.R. 5512, 2 counties in the Eastern District of Missouri will be shifted from its Eastern Division to its Southeastern Division. The bill also eliminates one of the 4 divisions within the Northern District of Mississippi and reallocates the counties within the eliminated division among the remaining 3 divisions. The members whose districts would be affected by these divisional changes, that being Representatives Benny Thompson, Greg Harper, Alan Nunnally, Joanne Emerson, and Russ Carnahan, have all sponsored or co-sponsored this bill. In deference to these members' familiarity with local conditions, therefore, we do not oppose these changes. We have made one revision to H.R. 5512 at the request of the Judicial Conference to give the judges in the 2 affected districts some additional time to implement the bill's new divisional realignments, the version of the bill that we are considering today includes a 60-day delayed effective date. I thank Chairman Lamar Smith and Subcommittee Chairman Howard Coble for their assistance in moving this bipartisan legislation, and that should improve the administration of justice in these judicial districts. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Georgia reserved. Gentleman from North Carolina.
I thank the gentleman from Georgia for his generous remarks. Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Georgia.
Yes, I would yield to the gentleman from Mississippi and the sponsor of this bill as much time as he may consume.
Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized for as much time as he shall consume.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I rise in support of my bill, H.R. 5512, the Divisional Realignment Act of 2012, which will improve court management for the United States District Courts in the Northern District of Mississippi and the Eastern District of Missouri. I introduced this bill to help realign counties in those federal judicial districts, which include a change that affects counties within my own congressional district. I'm pleased to have my colleagues in the Mississippi delegation who represent impacted counties join me as original co-sponsors. Congressman Harper and Nunnally, in Missouri, Representative Emerson and Carnahan, whose congressional districts overlay the counties affected by the change there, also joined as original co-sponsors. H.R. 5512 will primarily eliminate the Delta Division, one of the 4 existing statutory divisions in the Northern District of Mississippi. To accomplish this, the 8 counties in the Delta Division will be absorbed into other divisions, while some counties from the others will be realigned. The proposed also renames the Eastern Division as the Aberdeen Division and the Western Division as the Oxford Division. The 2 places authorized to hold court now from the Delta Division will continue to exist under the realignment within the Greenville Division. The Delta Division, unlike those 3 divisions, is now serviced by a federal courthouse. This fact has created unnecessary issues regarding venue and jury selection. The realignment will ensure that all counties in the district are statutorily linked to the division with courthouses. It will also be more economical for juror travel and will more fairly balance the caseload in the Northern District. This realignment is supported by the judges of the Northern District of Mississippi, the Fifth Circuit Judicial Council, and the Judicial Conference of the United States. In addition, the proposal is backed by the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Mississippi. Regarding the Eastern District of Missouri, H.R. 5512 simply shifts 2 counties from the Eastern Division of the Southeastern Division. This adjustment will enhance convenient access to court services for the public and improve judicial administration of the caseload. More specifically, the realignment will allow cases for those 2 counties to be held in Cape Girardeau, which has a new state-of-the-art federal courthouse. This location is also closer for citizens in those counties than in the St. Louis location where the court is now held. As a result, the change will lessen the burden on jurors traveling, as well as lessen the cost of mileage expenses. In addition, the shift will better align the places of holding court with the total population served today. This realignment is supported by the judges of the Eastern District of Missouri, the 8th Judicial Circuit Council, the Judicial Conference of the United States. In addition, it is supported by the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri. Lastly, I note that the bill under consideration today has been amended by adding a section that establishes a 60-day delayed effective date. This will ensure that both courts have sufficient time to transition court operations to local orders and scheduling. Mr. Speaker, the House Judiciary Committee reported Divisional Realignment Act favorably by a voice vote on May 16th. I urge my colleagues to support this necessary, bipartisan, and non-controversial bill, which would help constituents and improve federal court operations in my home state of Mississippi and in the state of Missouri. Mr. Speaker, with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Georgia.
I'll yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Georgia yields back. Gentleman from North Carolina.
I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from North Carolina yields back. All time having been yielded back, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5512 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Speaker.
1 second. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?